It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Hey, it's Feedback Friday. And this Feedback Friday, I have pulled a bunch of comments and now I forget which video they're, each one is connected to, but they're, um, general things that I I personally am very interested in the structure of communication, and I'm always glad when I get comments um, that are structurally about communication. Um, so yeah, I like this stuff. Sorry, I'm zoning. It's been um, I've been working with a lot of people having pretty serious health problems lately, and you know, going through my own health problems. It's sort of like, oh, I can viscerally connect to how hard that is, and it's kicking me in the feels. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just with the I don't know if you guys get this, but when you go through a period of crappy sleep, when you finally start getting better sleep, you're worse cognitively for a bit before you're better again. I don't know, just me. But yeah, let's get into the feedback patron stuff. Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone you can use it but can't afford it. Very important lately, coffee.com/Leanna K, or the men's group GoFundMe. Discord links have gone out to all the various social media channels now, so the best way to get invited is so that we can validate you are who you say you are. um that's how we're doing it for now, especially because of the way the world currently is, and that's part of the reason that how we communicate is so interesting and important to me. As somebody who's a designer, somebody who's interested in narratives, the structure fascinates me. And I think that how something tells a story is far more important than than a lot of people think. And that's true even of like real life communication. So let's get into your comments. um I do completely respect the idea oh, sorry. First of all, a lot of people commented where, hey, they wouldn't have noticed what I was wearing if I hadn't said something. A lot of people said that about uh one of the videos. I don't remember which one, but I appreciate that. I I have never really been big on fashion, and I think that's one of the damages that trying to move into the more visual based things like Instagram and TikTok. Um that's one of those things that may have caused more damage in me than I thought, because they are obsessed. I mean, it doesn't matter what you say, they don't comment on the video, they make fun of the way you look. And, you know, as much as I personally do not care, I am aware of the way the world works. You don't see, and more and more the regular looking guys aren't even being elevated on YouTube. It's all people who claim to be intellectuals but clearly spend a lot of time at the gym. They look like they spend more time at the gym than reading books. So I mean, that's the world we live in. So I just wanted to say I appreciate that. The fact that you guys don't care about that stuff is fantastic. So getting onto the comments. I do completely respect the idea of overwhelm is the reason why most women both want vulnerable emotions from men in their lives and then end up recoiling from the very thing they asked for. Both the fact that it's new and new things can be scary and the pressure of being the assumed emotional expert can take a toll. My concern is how and when to tell the difference between genuine overwhelm and deliberate bait and switch situations. Someone who's okay with something right up until the critical moment and is then suddenly not okay just in time to derail the event, conversation, etc. I'm sure a lot of these situations are based on real overwhelm and mental health issues, but sometimes it does seem like patterns emerge and there are people who are prevented from expressing their feelings or enjoying an event about themselves, birthdays, graduations, etc., because someone else has a crisis or was overwhelmed and it is a little too regular to feel like the real thing. And since these situations exist in other contexts, I wonder how to advise men to tell the difference between true miscommunications regarding feelings and when it is a deliberate bait and switch situation. Great question. And whether it's deliberate or not, if a person is relying on it too often, then yeah, that's an issue. Especially I've been to events and I can't stand when someone shows up in an event not in a place to sell like an emotional or mental place to celebrate the other person. They are calling attention to themselves at a time when it's not about them. And whether that's deliberate or not, if somebody has a habit of that, personally, I think you don't invite them anymore. That's just what I do. If someone is constantly a problem, then you don't invite them. And people are like, but that's excluding. Yeah. Sometimes there's a reason to exclude someone, right, Slimer? Right. I'm thinking of cleaning this up. I'm afraid this is a little too terrifying, but interested in second opinions. I don't know. Uh, Sometimes I look at that and go, this may scare new clients. But anyway, moving on. Um, Intent is this thing. It does matter. We can't be sure. We're only looking at the shadows of the reflections of intent. And obviously, the first thing is do you see the person actually trying to improve? Not saying I'm trying, actually trying to improve. I have found, at least in my life, there are two types of people. People who implement corrections right away. And this can be something as simple as, please don't use this word. I don't like it. Uh, People who try. They're not perfect. We can't expect perfection, but they try. There's those people. And then there's the people who, yes, I will do better going forward, but they're not making the correction now. They have gotten used to being allowed to get away with it because they say they'll do it later when they could be doing it now. Those are the people where there's a higher chance, I'll say, that they're actually not going to make the necessary changes. And I've been saying this a lot lately. You have the absolute right to determine who has access to you. If you don't want to be around someone, that's your right. And if people are pressuring you to be around someone for whatever reason, that's not okay. It's got to be a choice, you know? So that to me is, if things are moving in the right direction, even if it's small, for me, okay, that person's trying. There isn't a not just deliberate intent, profound neglect of consideration for other people is also just they're so up their own ass. They don't pay attention to the effect they're having on other people. That's not deliberate, but it's neglectful. And you have the right to say, I want better. I want to be around people who not are obsessed with people pleasing. No, people pleasing is bad too. But um they're making the attempt. You see the effort. And you want that ideally you want a balance of people being able to relax to a certain degree around each other, but also show some consideration for people as well. So that's not a it's obviously a case by case basis, and that's why effective communication is even more important, because it makes it clear that the people who are sincerely trying and may just not be there yet versus the people that are making excuses. So like impossible to be more precise on that one, but those are the broad strokes. Um, one Another person put it in military terms. This is about the how to fight with a woman video. I do remember this one. Um, if you're going into a fight, you need to know the following things at minimum: who you're fighting with and what you're fighting for, what your victory conditions are, what your disagreement threshold is. Do I need to have this fight right here, right now? You need to know what the rules of the fight are. Um, and the commenter went on to say that, you know, up until a couple of years ago, we didn't really have discussions about girl world in public where men were. And he commented on the fact that people aren't having the same fight. And if you're not fighting about the same thing, you're just screaming at each other. You're not doing anything productive. And I thought that was a really good insight. So I'm just going to read the comment. But that the thing about victory conditions and disengagement thresholds, and do I need to have this fight right now? Those are all things that if you haven't done work on your own past traumas, get very, very hard to really assess, because your doomsday clock internally is always 1 minute to midnight. Um, and that's why it's really important to address the things that have happened to you in the past so you're not carrying them forward. A lot of people don't know what their victory conditions and disengagement thresholds are because they don't feel like they have any control over their own circumstances. And that's why they end up being extremely outwardly bitter, and they take it out on some sort of other, uh, whether it be the opposite sex or some scapegoat group. I think that's a lot of the reason people kick at gamers. I can't prove that, but it's just, observation of a lot of people. But yeah, working on those disengagement thresholds. Well, first of all, what are you fighting for? What are you looking to achieve? Very important to have that clear. And then, but that disengagement threshold, the point that you are gonna walk away because this is not like, nope, line crossed, nope. And it's important to say that outright, that it's like, for me, it's when somebody starts name calling, that's it, I walk. Not because it bothers me, because someone who does that is not in the mindset to work something out. It's got to be a productive mindset, or it's a waste of my time. And God knows I don't have enough hours in the day as is. I'm not um and more I've started thinking I have to lower my disengagement threshold. There are just going to be some people who I know are good people and I know they're trying, but they're just not ready to be in certain environments. And as much as it's hurtful to that individual, it's not fair for the 50 other people who have to deal with this person who, through no fault of their own is being disruptive. And that that's a language shift. I wish, because I've been thinking a lot about the term appropriate. I'm actually thinking about doing an entire episode of It's Not Therapy on the idea of appropriateness. And I've been thinking about this because there's an issue fairly recently about, well, it's not appropriate behavior. And that's one of those words. It's like it's a placeholder word, right? It's a word we use because we don't actually know what's wrong with the behavior. And most of the time, I've found recently observing this, because I like to be specific and I like language to mean shit. Uh, Not appropriate usually means you are being disruptive at a point that it isn't doing anything positive. And there's so much of that. We have to disrupt, you know? And no. Sometimes no. People are going to have negative feelings about disruptions. People are going to have thoughts about somebody who is constantly derailing because they, I don't know, think they're being funny, think what they want is more important than what other people want in an area. It's basic consideration. And that's really what it comes down to. Appropriate usually means, or not appropriate usually means inconsiderate or disruptive. And so, this is the importance of speaking precisely. We get down to what the actual issue is. So, and then we get into the term valid. And I loved this comment because I love this granular kind of stuff. It does lead to more effective communication. I think the definition of valid needs to be given for these situations. The term valid can take on different meanings depending on context. For example, you can acknowledge that someone genuinely feels the way they do about something. A person having feelings about something doesn't mean that the feelings are grounded in reality or fact. You see this with people freaking out about drag queens turning kids trans or microchips and vaccines despite the lack of evidence, or even evidence to the contrary in some cases. And yes, that's the mantra we get in like communication strategies. Validating somebody's feelings doesn't mean you're validating their facts. And you have to be really careful when someone is in a very distressed state, which is why, it's so important to be able to name your feelings and communicate them, because obviously you deal with a frightened or sad person differently than you deal with an angry person, right? There's different, the learn to block parlance, it's different blocks, high block, low block, riposte, sorry, I always mispronounce that word. And yeah, that can be really difficult because we do live in this world where we overvalue book smarts and to the detriment of people smarts. And it was funny because when I was much younger, people used to say, Leanna, you're book smart, but you're not street smart. And these were the least street smart people at the end of it. They're the ones that got into drugs and got into gang style activity and were basically little thugs. That's not street smarts, because street smarts is how to avoid making those bad choices. But, there was an example of someone who was trying to help through criticism, which, lacks wisdom. But the idea of smarts, be smart, be smart. And we don't emphasize enough being wise. Wisdom is hard earned. You cannot study for wisdom. Wisdom comes from a lifetime of dealing with shit. And the problem is that the people that lack wisdom don't know how to recognize wisdom. But the general rule of thumb is if someone you respect is coming at something differently, give them a hearing. And I'm always baffled at the people that are like, yeah, I usually love what you have to say, but on this, you're totally wrong. It's like, if you love what I have to say, how about engaging with what I'm saying? And, it is possible that sometimes I'm totally wrong. It happens. Um, but often somebody is not totally wrong, especially on complicated things, even on something as um, complex as a video game. The number of times I have faced hostility and been dogpiled for something, for saying this is bad in a game that eventually got patched. Happened with The Last of Us 2 and the cross in the synagogue. And I will never, never forget the way Naughty Dog handled that. Instead of saying, yep, that was just a mistake, we're going to fix it, they grandstanded and quietly patched it months later. And let people like me who are like, that's just a mistake and that is erasure of culture, because synagogues are not churches, they're not designed the same way. That's wrong. That's handled very badly. The other one people got really mad at me for was the inventory interfaces in Cyberpunk 2077. And I actually stopped the Twitch stream where I was streaming Cyberpunk to point out what was wrong with the menus. And sure enough, even though people got really, really angry with me, that was one of the things that they fixed. When you have someone who has, especially if they're talking in an area outside their expertise, feel free to ignore them. And there's a lot of people that do that, especially on geopolitical things. But when someone is speaking in their area of expertise, listen to them even if you don't agree, because they're probably saying something that has some merit, and you'd be better off giving it a chance, trying it on, seeing how it fit. And it's amazing how many people who don't do that because they need certainty. And the biggest mistake you can make in dealing with other people is being certain you know where the other person's coming from. Because the other person might not even be certain where they're coming from. They can't explain why they're having the reaction they're having. So if they don't know why they're responding the way they are, how can you possibly know? You can only know for sure what a person is telling you. And it is amazing how often people jump at shadows and infer things that people didn't actually say because, oh, in the past, this meant that. Somebody saying I'm fine meant they were absolutely not fine. Well, that may be true, but for me, I'm fine. My idea of fine means I'm in chronic pain, but it's manageable. That's my baseline. That's an adequate day. Not a good day. A good day is when I hurt less. My eyes are working a little bit better. I have less brain fog. But, fine means functional. That may not be what fine means for somebody else. And so the only way to know what someone means is to ask. And enough people don't do that. Too many people try to people please and mind read. And the thing about that is when you're wrong, you're spectacularly wrong. And then someone's so embarrassed about how spectacularly wrong they were, they can't admit they're wrong. It's tragic, but I see it every day. And this goes to, and I mean, the commenter talked about, drag queens turning kids trans. Yeah, there's no evidence for that. There's no evidence to the contrary because, well, why would anybody test that? It's absurd. The microchips in vaccines. People clearly don't realize, how microchips are not in like subvisual. I don't know if you've ever seen the needle that they put microchips in pets. It's a big ass needle. Those things are not fitting through a regular needle. But people believe it without evidence one way or another. It's true. And it's amazing to me lately with geopolitical events, the war we shall not name because it's so toxic. The left is completely blowing its intellectual high ground on other topics by engaging in the exact same, well, yes, we actually don't have facts, verifiable facts, one way or the other. There's a reason we call it the fog of war, but people are latching onto the narratives they want, even though they don't really make any sense. They're treating war like professional wrestling or a football match. And I don't get why. And I don't want to know why. I want to avoid those brain worms. I don't want, and this is it. Don't you want to know why people feel the way they do? Well, no, in this case, I don't, because it's toxic thinking. What I want is for people to deal with what's actually there. I can accept that people have certain opinions, but in this case, no, I absolutely do not know why. Do not want to know why, because there's no fact-based reason for this. I don't like that people get upset by certain things I say. I will not take responsibility for the things people read into things I say that are not there, because that way lies madness. I don't listen to somebody saying, well, you chose your words poorly, when people won't actually deal with the words I chose. And in terms of that original question about overwhelm and when to see it as, yes, valid, understandable, and when, no, this is someone not doing the work, that is another sign that deal with what I said, please, not what you think I meant. I'm neurodivergent in a very, very weird way. There's no possible way that I know I can predict how a neurotypical person is going to infer shit. Deal with what I say, please. Because otherwise then, well, you clearly implied there's no such thing as a clear implication. I want to get coffee mugs made that say there's no such thing as a clear implication, because there's no such thing as a clear implication. That, that's the concept is absurd in its face. Implication is by definition not clear. And so if somebody is constantly getting overwhelmed because they are choosing to read shit in that isn't obvious on the surface, you have no control over that, and you don't have to validate that. You can validate that you care that they're upset, but you don't have to submit to them shifting reality on you. That's very, very clear. And this is where the final comment. Yes, I picked the right amount of comments. My ears are ringing right now. I don't know if that's... No, it's not the headphone. It's either my ears are ringing or it's outside. Apologies for that sound if you can hear it. Oh, it stopped. Okay. Thank you for saying things about the no bad tactics kind of mentality and the really wrong stuff and the unpopular opinion is still correct. This is why I don't like the censorship about destroy all humans. There's a lot more censorship than just a side mission. I may disagree with the joke thing because I think the saying the joke is offensive is wrong. That manipulation on someone else's part to try to change behavior. But yeah, I get it. The censorship in games thing is interesting because, before I started streaming Alan Wake on Twitch, I was playing Yakuza 3. And there's a very interesting disclaimer at the beginning of that game about the game being from 2009 and reflecting certain laws and norms of the time. And this is an instance where I think the developer did the right thing, just putting that disclaimer on the game and leaving the game as is. because there are some things in that game that I do find extremely challenging because it was more common then. We know they're wrong now, and I mean there are comments about black people in that game for one that are racist. But that game is reflecting kind of the uglier elements of Japanese culture, including the racism against the Chinese and Indonesians. They have the right to depict that. But a central thing, there's this heartwarming element where Kiryu is running an orphanage. But Haruka, the little girl from earlier games, is pretty much acting as a surrogate mother to other children. And I can't figure out, she's old enough to kind of date. So she's somewhere between, I don't know, she looks 12 to me. She might be 14. But we would consider that, by modern standards, parentification. That she's taking on the role of a parent style figure at an age that's too young. And that doesn't mean kids can't have some chores. Just her being primarily responsible for the cooking, for instance. She's too young for that. And some people would be, that's fine. I was doing that at 14. And I had to deprogram some of the things that did. So it's a real thing, but I was able to go, all right, it was a game from 2009. They put a disclaimer on it. I am an adult, and if you're playing a game like that that deals with some pretty hardcore shit, as goofy as it is, you should be able to contextualize that. Similarly, I was watching the old Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends cartoons on Disney, and they have this huge disclaimer in front of certain episodes that do have a lot of anti-Asian racism, especially against the Japanese, ironically. And it's like, it was wrong then, it's wrong now. Viewer discretion is advised. That's all I need. I don't need it censored. And this is where we get into, in a perfect world, that's how we would handle things like the remove scene from Destroy All Humans, where basically a person is forcibly transitioned by an alien ray or something like that. That was the nature of the complaint, and they removed the quest line. And see, do we argue semantics here about the actual definition of sexism, requiring it being an external body, not the creators choosing to remove it in the remaster? No. The sentiment of leave it alone, let it stand on the original release, just remaster it so people can play it now. That's a philosophical debate and a creator rights issue. And that's one of those ones I see both sides, and I have gotten into personal trouble because I tend to not delete past statements of mine. I want to show evolution in my thinking. And I'm aware that that means people can go in and dig up old tweets and all that stuff. And it's like, whatever, I'm not a joiner. I don't agree with that tactic. And there are consequences to that. And decision making is about morality, absolutely. It's also about what consequences people are willing to accept, what type of people you want to attract in your life. And these are hard choices, no matter who has to make them. They're not made lightly. And don't believe what developers say publicly. A lot of them convince themselves that they actually think these things, but they actually don't. They cave to pressure. They buckled. And people do. People do. They buckle. And they have to live with that. But, you know, the strident, well, we're doing it because it's more respectful and things like that. Let's face it, no, that's not true. This isn't a respect paradigm. They did it because they're afraid. And because I'm a very tough motherfucker, I I don't want to have to be as tough as I am. So I'm not going to set that standard for other people. I do know, I personally, and this is why I made the video about how, you know, how to admit you're wrong. I don't cave to the mob. And this is why my content's not more popular. I stand by it. I made a choice. I would rather be able to have these great conversations with you guys and have a client base and facilitators that know I will have their backs. And sometimes I will have their backs even when I wouldn't have made the choice they made, but I see why they made it. It's a valid choice. Sometimes decisions are lateral. One is not better, one is just different. And that is the most important thing to me because I am not interested in popularity. I am interested in community. Because having to keep millions of people happy at any given time, I did that. I did my time in television. I'm not interested anymore. I'd rather have great conversations with fewer people than shitty sloganeric pandering to millions. That's a choice. And we have to live with the consequences of those choices. But because I want benefit of doubt, I also extend benefit of doubt to other people, and talking to some people about why they made certain choices. A lot of the time, it's just a question of they have to meet this bar when they do their modeling in terms of sales. They just can't afford to lose that segment. Now, in the case of Destroy All Humans, I'm not sure why they were going for the very sensitive people. I would have preferred they'd gone the way that Yakuza did, just put a disclaimer on it. But these are tough calls. And I'm not sure because I don't know all the variables that that team was dealing with. Unless I'm on the inside and part of the conversation, I can't judge it completely. And because I want benefit of doubt, I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt. Because unless you've actually made a game or been involved with making a game, you can't appreciate the sheer number of tiny little choices that just rack up and just overwhelm you. So we have to weigh deontological, some things are just right, some things are just wrong. With consequentialist, yes, you have to be prepared to accept the consequences of the choices you make that you can predict. And then heavy benefit of doubt, because that's what I want. I will assume someone is coming at me in good faith until I see signs that they're not. The minute I start seeing signs of bad faith, I'm going to go, whoa, okay, we're going to do a few things here of let's see if this person is willing to play ball. Let's see if this person is willing to work with me instead of just bashing at me. If they don't, I end the conversation. But until then, people get benefit of doubt in my world. And I personally think that is the best way to go about things, because I can't expect from another person something I'm not willing to give. So I don't like the censorious streak we're going through in terms of, yes, let's face it, even though that Destroy All Humans thing was a decision that the devs made, themselves. They were doing it based on outside censorship pressures. And I'm going to be mad at the external pressures, not the devs. Hope that makes sense. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK, or the men's groups on GoFundMe starting soon. We have to contend with U.S. Thanksgiving, but yeah, starting soon. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.